for a lot of leaders, there is analysis paralysis to some extent because they recognize there is a whole lot of risk, right? With introducing generative AI, especially, which, has some non-predictable outcomes. And really, I just say, hey, let's start small and look for moments of friction in your workflow, in your process, in having interdepartmental collaboration or communication. We don't have to start with, let's have AI now own our brand voice. That's not where to start, but could AI own project operations? It could.
Welcome to The Digital Footprint, a podcast for leaders in healthcare, public health, and education who are looking to leverage technology to solve problems and make a big impact. In each episode, we interview innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving the most challenging problems facing these industries. Join us as we dig into the colossal tasks involved in bringing a new digital product to life. Welcome to The Digital Footprint.
Hello, and welcome to Season 3 of The Digital Footprint, presented by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner bringing SaaS products to market and solving complex problems for clients, including helping them with their AI strategy. I'm your host, Richard Sims. I'm thrilled to be back for our third season, especially for this episode, because today's topic is one nearly every business leader and owner is thinking about. A lot of people are talking about it. Some aren't as openly. And it's all just AI. How's it going to change things? Is it going to make my business obsolete? As an agency owner, this is a conversation that current clients and prospects are clearly asking us about and trying to navigate all the time. Even big players, Fortune 500 companies, household names who I think objectively are, crushing it. Like even they are wrestling with this. So it's pretty across the board. And even for us at Tyrannosaurus Tech, we've always tried to be early adopters of AI as it's been evolving, but we've wrestled with it too because it's all come on so fast. But here's the reality. New technology has always demanded businesses evolve how they operate or become irrelevant. So I definitely think the better question to ask is not, will AI kill my business, but how can we evolve? How can we lean into it? How can we kind of future-proof, AI-proof the business and the team? And fortunately, our guest is here to help navigate just that. So joining me today, she is the founder of AI Growth Ops, an organization leading executives through AI transformation with strategic approaches that scale. She's a serial entrepreneur, four-time growth marketer, has a very impressive client portfolio, including BMW, Coca-Cola, the Home Depot, the CDC, Porsche, could go on and on. A lot of great experience to draw from there. She's been named a mobile woman to watch by Mobile Marketer magazine and one of 5 inspiring women in tech to watch in Atlanta. So please welcome to the show, Sarah Woodward.
Thanks so much, Richard. I'm so excited to be here. It's awesome to be able to jam on AI topics and really just talk about the practical applications and what we can expect.
For sure. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and this kind of stemmed from us going back and forth a little bit in the comments on one of my posts, which was related to, how do you kind of AI proof your team? And I do want to touch on that later. But I'm especially glad to have you on, and you may not even remember this, Sarah, and I wouldn't blame you, but we first met years and years ago. It was when you were with Stable Kernel, and we were just starting out. You were very supportive, gave me a lot of good advice, and then you all actually referred to us one of our very first clients. So I'll always be indebted. I think they were too small for y'all, but just right for us.
Awesome. I do remember meeting for coffee at, I think, Perk and Inman Park, maybe, or Inman.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been a long time, but I'm glad to kind of pick back up the relationship. So let's switch gears because today's topic is incredibly timely, of course. So as an expert in the generative AI space, just to dive right into some of these topics we want to get into, like what sentiments are you hearing out there, right? I mean, people are excited, people are freaked out. Like, what are you kind of coming across, and where do you think that's stemming from as you're talking to a lot of businesses that are trying to figure out the direction they want to go with this stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a little bit of people being all over the place, right? So I think that, we're in a bubble where people are talking about AI all the time. And so naturally, I kind of feel like I walk into a room, maybe I don't need to do 101 in generative AI, but the truth is we still do. There's a lot of companies, there's a lot of people who still haven't played with, a chat GPT or something like that. And companies are trying to figure out, how does this fit into our business strategy or our tech strategy? And so I see a lot of different kind of approaches, some of which are more on the practitioner level, who are a little nervous about what is the implication of AI? Could it potentially take my job, or could it at least interfere with the things about my job I really love? And so that's a whole lot of where I spend my time, is working with teams to make sure that we're not abstracting away the things that they love, right?
Right.
And trying to think about what are all the things that we don't love in our jobs. And I think that for a lot of leaders, there is analysis paralysis to some extent, because they recognize there is a whole lot of risk, right? With introducing generative AI, especially, which, has some non-predictable outcomes, and, are really trying to think, okay, how do we adopt these new technologies in responsible ways, or ways that make sense within our existing tech stack? And really, how do we just onboard it in a way that people buy in, as well as think through how this is going to impact their jobs and whatnot.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I kind of see it all over the map too. I think a lot of people are excited, and then you kind of also sense the anxiety behind that, of course. Some people are truly scared, and I think it is going to be, and already is, very disruptive. So that's not irrational, right? But I think we're aligned in the mindset that, like, if you lean into it, embrace it, see it as a tool, that hopefully some of that fear can dissipate and you can really enjoy the benefits. And to your point, like anything that drives efficiency, in theory, it should free up your time to do things that are more productive, like more, more stimulating, really require more vision or problem solving, like kind of the higher level things that I think most folks ultimately want to do or move more into. So going a little further on the question I originally asked, one thing I get a kick out of, and it's like this for other trends that have come along over the years. Maybe trends isn't the right word, but other innovations that have come along over the years. But then AI, of course, is like kind of the behemoth, I think, right? Everyone's talking about it, as you said. I know a lot of people are really like ahead of the curve, but then everyone feels this compulsion to kind of like really be on top of it, say that it's now driving their business. It's like when you're out there and you really pull back the curtain, how many folks are just talking the talk, walking the walk? Like there's a lot of in between there. What's your read on where we really are? Because we're still so early in the scheme of things. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think, organizations like yours and very tech-forward organizations who have been involved in traditional AI for a long time, I think that there is still a lot of lip service to, hey, we have AI on board, but it's in our products, right? It's not necessarily generative. It's not being used by individuals in their daily tasks. And so I think that while they have really strong chops on the development side or the technology side, it's really the rest of the employee workforce that they have not invested in. And so how do you think about doing that? And, I saw a funny meme this morning that was like, I want AI to do my laundry and wash my dishes so that I can write and do art and not the other way around. I still love to write. And so for the most part, I do not use AI to write because that's something that brings me a lot of joy. And so where I see teams get a little bit stuck is trying to figure out, where is that moment where we need to start introducing AI? And a lot of it is really, I just say, hey, let's start small and look for moments of friction in your workflow, in your process, in having interdepartmental collaboration or communication. We don't have to start with, let's have AI now own our brand voice. That's not where to start, but could AI own project operations? It could. Could it free up a product manager or a project manager to actually be a thought leader as opposed to the guy who's backlog grooming and following up with dev tasks and that sort of thing? So I think that where people are trying things is a little bit all over the place. Content creation, of course, is the number one use case right now across industries. And I think that content operation should absolutely be one of the first use cases, but I also think that just operations in general should be where we start, because that facilitates people being able to do their jobs more effectively, more productively, and really get back to the things that they enjoy doing instead of worrying about, did I fill out my timesheet, or, have I, adequately updated all of my stories today?
I love what you're sharing, and I have so many thoughts. I don't even know where to begin, so I'll try not to go on and on. But I think that I've just been using the age-old, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. That analysis paralysis is very real, and we're certainly seeing that in people that are holding off or they're frozen. And I think people kind of get fixated on the really big picture, really innovative use cases of AI, or are thinking about, wow, how does this change our entire business strategy? And maybe those are healthy questions to ask. They probably are, but I think you have to just start small with less intimidating implementations. And also that can help the team grasp what's possible and see it as a tool that aids them rather than a threat. And yeah, I think when it comes to content creation too, I know one thing that we have beat the drum on social media, or on LinkedIn rather, in some of our posts, is that it is a tool, but you are still responsible for the deliverable, right? So things like content creation, if you're using AI, great, but the attitude needs to be this is a tool that helps me, whatever, come up with the first draft or play with the verbiage that I want to use. But if you don't take responsibility for the output and really aren't using this tooling to do better work, then I think you're kind of missing the point, right?
Yeah.
I really want to caution people to see it as a silver bullet shortcut that they don't have to still really take ownership of the quality of what they're doing,
Yeah. So I build a lot of automated workflows for clients. And so we're imagining, how do we map out a process? How do we think about mental models of your employees who are working that process, right? And just thinking about, okay, well, where are opportunities to facilitate some of that passing of information, right? So for instance, one of the pieces that most recently that I've been automating for a lot of creative teams is simply task delegation. So if I create some sort of, let's say, a Trello card that is about a design task, it alerts the entire design team in Slack. Someone can raise their hand and say, I got that. And then that automatically updates Trello, for instance, and assigns that person to a card, and then, assigns a deadline and communicates back to the account team what's happening, right? And so there's no I stole the joy out of my job piece to that. It's really just, how did I steal away the tediousness of, okay, let me go ask this designer what's on their plate, or let me ask this designer. We can just automate some of these pieces, right? And so what I really like is just thinking about, how do we create, it's like an empathy map for our own people. So I feel like as leaders, it's definitely our jobs to make sure that we're creating environments where our employees can thrive. And so thinking about, okay, what makes their day-to-day life better? And so that's what I'm helping organizations do, is let's just start with one piece. Let's start with, what is an immediate point of pain that we can solve that doesn't require us to know every AI tool out there or every automation tool out there. Let's just think about how can AI recognize that there's a decision to make in a workflow, let it make that decision and push forward. And then have clear moments where we're breaking that automation, having a moment where a human has to come in and say, oh, I have a solid first draft here. Let me zhuzh it up with maybe an executive quote, or maybe we have a proprietary process or graphic that I think would go great in this blog piece. And let me just play with the language a little bit to sound more like it's in our voice. So I think that there's ways that we can do it without sort of sacrificing the human piece, as well as, you know, not putting out stuff that sounds super robotic. There is an employer here in Atlanta who early in this sort of hype cycle laid off a lot of their senior content team. And they said, hey, we're just going to automate all of this. And it was terrible. And so the content didn't, you know, it wasn't in the brand voice. It didn't speak to personas. It didn't understand benefits and value prop and everything. And so when they went back to hire those same content people, guess whose hourly rates were significantly higher? You know, so like, don't make dumb decisions because we're betting on this, you know, futuristic thing. I think of core adjacent transformational innovation. What can we do today that affects our core business, either from a process standpoint, an efficiency standpoint, productivity, before we think about, well, how do we then go sell this? Because if we don't understand internally how it impacts people, how they have to change their mental model, how they have to adopt new technology, because we've all seen people buy the $100 million Salesforce stack and then no one uses it to its fullest advantage.
Right.
So like, how do we think about doing this more intelligently?
Yeah. Excellent points. And then I think that instance you're referencing where they like let go of all the senior, you know, a content creator folks, like there's obviously a disconnect for a lot of folks, even though this stuff is moving very fast, of like where things really are right now. And I think that's true across the board. And like, maybe we'll talk about this later in the conversation. For us, like for engineering, for example, we've been using, you know, GitHub Copilot and all this stuff for a long time, and it's hugely helpful. I think, you know, it will continue to be really impactful with engineers and particular types of more repetitive tasks or more just rudimentary kind of, you know, junior level stuff. But obviously, for now, and I think for the foreseeable future, like you need folks that understand how these different systems tie in together, you know, really like how you're leveraging all these various services and products that make a actual functional, robust product, not just churning out lines of code. And then I think even more importantly, good engineering is great, but it's really about, do you understand your users? Do you understand the market? Is there product market fit? Like, what's the landscape? Are these pain points significant enough that they justify spend? It's like all those fundamentals, even if you get an AI that you can press a button and it churns out an app, like that doesn't solve making it a viable business play. So I think the cart gets a little ahead of the horse in some of the thinking on this stuff, I think. But, you know, that's largely just because the fervor is like so strong right now too.
Yeah, I agree. I think certainly people ask about, hey, what's the potential detriment to my job, right? And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I was watching a developer talk about how there's actually not enough the fun, you know, like the metal elements in the world to create the processors needed to replace all developers. Like there is not enough minerals in the earth to be able to do that. So congratulations, y'all are safe. But, you know, the amount of processing power that is required to do this, I mean, the amount of water that is used in order to process things, I think that we all have to look at AI can't just be the thing we slap on everything, because there's also a sustainability aspect to it. And so, like, where is it going to have the most impact? And to your point, what does the market actually want from us? I think that often we get really in love with our solutions and our products, without really asking our customers, hey, did you even want this thing?
Yeah.
So like Home Depot is doing something really cool where they're testing using generative AI on their website. And, I heard the CMO talking about this, and she, Molly Batten, and she's saying, you can now imagine yourself in your own kitchen. What would it look like if we reskinned it in French Provençal or a modern aesthetic or whatever? And so those are the type of use cases you would imagine that, a HomeDepot.com shopper would be very interested in, right? Yeah. Like, let me imagine this bare paint on the wall or whatever. So I think that we're starting to see more companies come out with useful applications that people want. But I think right now, internally is still where the opportunity lies. I think something like 80% of workers will have been using a ChatGPT, whether or not they are allowed to.
Right.
And so how do you make sure that you're protecting your employee, your customers, your IP? Well, you've got to recognize that this is happening regardless of whether or not you want it to. And so how do you make sure that people have safe environments where they can play, where they can experiment? These are, especially in an agency model, our teams are the ones who are really thinking about innovative new ways to touch customers and serve clients, right? And so I think they're the ones who are going to have more of a voice, more of opinion, more data to be able to say, look, these are some of the use cases we need to be testing because they would make our lives easier and they would make our clients' lives easier as well.
Yeah, very true. I think a lot of folks are like using ChatGPT in their day-to-day. Let's say at like a large enterprise and there's no guardrails. And on one hand, I don't fault them, right? Like I'm encouraging people to kind of lean in and embrace it. But of course, there's a lot of risk there. I mean, there's potentially proprietary information they should not be inputting. Obviously, there's like bias they might not be accounting for and, all kinds of issues. So it's going to be very interesting seeing how companies try to wrangle that and like, even, this is maybe going too big picture, but like in the education system, it's like, that's a big question, of course. Like to what extent are, I'm not talking like young kids, but like kids in school, like when are they going to start learning that this is like at their disposal and how to use it properly and responsibly? And, that friction, however that continues to evolve, is going to be wild, I think.
Absolutely. I see a lot of, especially at the collegiate level, encouragement to use this. I mean, you have to, and you're preparing people for the workforce, right? So they need to understand how to use it. But then there's a lot of reactiveness too. And so I think Ethan Malik, for instance, who I know a lot of us love and follow, he is a professor at Wharton and an AI researcher. He has even said that most of these AI detection platforms are terrible and not accurate at all. And so students are getting flagged for cheating when they're not really cheating, right?
Yeah.
And there's a ways to go before we're going to be at a place where we can really rely more intently, I think, on these things. For me, healthcare is a space that I'm very concerned about because we already know historically that patient outcomes using AI can be bad. There are definitely populations that there's not enough data because they have been underserved, historically. And so because of the way the models are built, AI will predict that they don't need as much care. Well, it's because they haven't had enough access to care. And so, I think that there's a lot of things where, you could automate charting, for instance, or, dictation of meeting with a patient. But when it comes to predictive models, I mean, I'm not ready to be part of that because I'm not ready to hold that responsibility. So I do like working with my marketing teams and my operation teams and sales teams because these are very minimum risk kind of use cases. And I think that we've got a lot of work to do before we can get to those higher risk cases or at least much smarter people than I need to be leading those charges, right?
No, I like that. I mean, I feel like with a lot of new tech and AI being a perfect example, like, yes, my impulse is to look for like the low hanging fruit and kind of filter out some of the noise that, you have to be thinking of like the biggest sweeping innovation to do it.
Right. We'll get there.
Right. I mean, I think it's just got to be one step at a time, like anything else.
No one learns to fly a plane because they knew how to ride a bike.
Yeah, I like that.
You know?
Okay, cool. Yeah, good to know. You know, I heard someone say, and we've kind of adopted this, it's like AI isn't going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI to do your role better might. And I think like for now, that's kind of a good way to think about it.
It is. It is. Much like none of us can do our jobs without, simple desktop publishing or whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to get to the point where we can't do our jobs without AI. And the thing is we rely on AI every single day without realizing it. As soon as I use Google Maps, I'm using AI. As soon as I use predictive text, I'm using AI. So we're already entrusting it. It's just now we have this generative interface where we don't need a developer to talk specifically to AI, right? This is now a level playing field. But one thing I do talk to a lot of people is don't forget your 15, 20 years of experience in your domain space when you get to this chat window, because if you're thinking about a product roadmap, you still have to intimately know who your user is. You have to have personas. You have to have user flows. You need to have done your research, right? We're not relying on AI to do all of that work for us. Now, it helps us identify where gaps in our understanding is, for sure. But you still have to bring that knowledge and that rigor to the process, even if AI is now part of the picture.
Yeah, totally. So a little bit of a pivot here, but again, going back to kind of what got us back in touch on LinkedIn, just talking about, I kind of used the term AI proofing your employees, right? And I know what I was speaking to specifically, we've been doing an ongoing series internally just based on leadership and communication skills. And so I think that for us, we have always kind of taken pride on just a differentiator being really good communication, educating clients along the way, being very careful with expectation setting, and, a lot of our folks being more technical, they never had any kind of formal training in, just how do you ask good open-ended questions? Like, how do you handle difficult conversations? Like, how do you build rapport? And that's been really fun and good for us. Like, I think it helps our business. It should give us a competitive edge because all of our folks are client facing in some capacity. And then I think just, positioning folks for future career growth beyond Tyrannosaurus Tech. Like, I just believe that a lot of those soft skills and kind of being able to like synthesize, bring people together, communicate it well, problem solve, I think is going to become more relevant, if anything.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that and just kind of expanding from there, because I know that was something that we were both curious about, I think.
Yeah. It's all about how you set your people up for success, right? And so having been through a few different tech agencies, right, you have a lot of incredibly smart people who maybe have never been in that consultant role before, or they have not actually been part of, say, company strategy or at least a product strategy, right? And so getting more people up to speed, to your point about understanding what are real business problems that we're trying to solve. So it's not that I need to create an app using React Native. That's not the solution, right? There is a problem. And the solution is that we facilitated something, right?
Yeah.
And so getting folks to think in those terms, I think is really critical, because when you are talking to the technology lead or the business unit lead, or even a C-suite of a potential customer, they want that reassurance that you've been in their shoes. And it's not reasonable that every member of our team will have led a business unit, for instance, right? Or created a company strategy. But building that empathy for why we're doing things.
Right.
One thing I learned early on when, working with development teams, often when you're looking at timing and costs and whatnot, the answer becomes, it depends. No client can sign off on it depends. And so how do we make sure we put ourselves in those shoes? And, one of the things you just mentioned was facilitation. And in a company that I was in at 352, that is one of the big skill building pieces that everyone was exposed to, because facilitation, no matter what discipline you're in, what industry you're in, bringing people together to solve problems is a critical skill. And even if you like to talk to people, that does not mean you're a facilitator. Right. And so how do you make sure that ideas from every corner of your organization are, being pulled out, right? And how do you watch for body language cues about someone who might have something to say but don't feel comfortable saying it in a space?
For sure.
Or being able to reframe a problem in a way that it gets people thinking about a solution in a different way. And, I have actually encouraged a few friends who are in the middle of career pivots to use their ChatGPT or their Claude 3 as a sparring partner to teach them how to be better facilitators.
Right.
And so, hey, ChatGPT, act like you are a buyer of this thing and help me along the process be able to communicate to them as we unpack a problem or start to brainstorm solutions. And so I think just exposure and intentionality on how information gets solved. One of the things that I've seen with one of my clients is there is a brilliant content person who is a prompt engineering wizard, and they can get the best content out of AI. The other 8 people on their team don't have that ability. So you can't scale that knowledge with just one person, right? It has to become something that infiltrates the entire organization, or at least an entire team, where people are often sharing information, so like setting up, when I do onboarding programs, part of it is, when are we doing lunch and learns? When are we doing donuts and Slack to talk about projects that we're working on? Or this cool thing I just learned and just did. I led a workshop a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, and I was prepping for it and creating some video of just walking them through some of the capabilities of ChatGPT, for instance. And all of a sudden, it is creating visual graphs and whatnot without me prompting it. And that happened to be the weekend that they rolled that out just prior to, 4.0 or whatever. And so I'm getting excited about this. And so I don't have a coworker immediately that I can be like, look what I just learned,
Right.
But I do have a group of buddies that we are all AI explorers together. And so I immediately shared like, look at this cool new feature, so I think that there is this excitement right now about learning. I know post-COVID, I needed something mentally stimulating.
Yeah.
And so as I built the company with a co-founder, I started using a lot of automation and AI to actually grow our company. And then I thought, you know what? This is actually more fun in the day-to-day than honestly dealing with a lot of executives who are in analysis paralysis. So I sort of pivoted my journey toward people who really just want to get started and want to fix some problems. And they know AI has the potential to do that. So let's go. Let's just figure out a small use case and let's go. And maybe not spend 8 to 12 months talking about it.
Right. No,
so there's my hot take.
No, I think that's great. And it's like anything else. It's, I don't know. There's this huge expanse of really the majority of people and businesses that are outside of the really big glamorous tech companies or that's where there's so much room for improvement and helping people, making them more productive, hopefully helping them focus on the work they enjoy doing. And so, I think right now that's probably a pretty underserved segment.
I agree. I talked to one leader who's in charge of an innovation team, has lots of developers under him. He said, hey, our teams are using GitHub Copilot to crank things out a whole lot faster. And so we talked a lot about, peer reviewing and how do you make sure there aren't bugs in the system? And, his point of view was any build I get from a junior developer is going to have bugs. It just is. And so why would I expect AI to perform any better than that? And so it's like, but if, say, a junior developer can all of a sudden do so much more than they could before and build things that they never thought possible, how much more engaged are they in their job, in the projects we're working on? Like, they're excited. And so I'm seeing that everywhere, whether or not it's marketing. Worked with a lady last year who just said, "You are making me love marketing again." And it's like, that's awesome. I worked with a team yesterday who, after showing them how we could automate away quite a few of their major admin headaches, they were just like, "You're giving us hope." And I'm like, in marketing and tech, we don't generally get those kind of accolades, so I will take them.
So I think a lot of our conversation today is spot on, that like a lot of these jobs, it's not that they're just getting eliminated. It's like they're changing. You're going to be able to like kind of hand off certain aspects that are more repetitive or tedious. But I think for a good number of jobs, you can see how like a lot of that ultimately will be gobbled up by AI. And in some spaces, and maybe in the future, like kind of across the board, what I've been thinking about is like, how do you grow leaders in that new landscape? Because I think a lot of great leaders really cut their teeth on like starting kind of at the bottom and like understanding all the ins and outs. And they have this like really broad context and have really directly experienced like the pain and touched all these little business operations. And if all of that's kind of abstracted away, it's just going to look very different for like how that really broad perspective comes up for leaders that ultimately are very young now, but are going to be moving into those positions. Have you thought much about that? And I don't know what that looks like.
Right. So yes, some of the teams I worked with, one was a PR agency, and in PR, you start with a lot of grunt work, which is things like building media lists of reporters and editors to reach out to. Well, guess what? You do not have to do that anymore. At all. Like, there are programs all day long, and frankly, there have been for a little while. But some of the benefits you get as someone who's going through that is you start to understand who is really going to be interested in my story based on their beat, who writes about this topic, right? And so a lot of that manual research does really feed into your point of view around what do I need to be good at? What do I need to understand? What context is critical for doing my job in the right way? And so I'll just be honest. The answer is I don't really know. I think we're early in, but the things that don't change about growing capable, good leaders is building empathy. It is getting out of employees' way to let them figure things out, give them safe spaces to fail without a lot of risk. So making sure that they have the freedom to be creative, to be innovative, to think. So what if there is a world where we're not doing as much grunt work as juniors and we are given room to actually think and maybe research case studies or maybe read books? Heaven forbid you had time on the clock to read a business book, right? Or learn a new skill, So I think that all those soft skills are going to be even more increasingly important as we have to talk to employees about how AI helps them evolve their careers, how it evolves our internal processes, how it evolves tasks. It's really just going to be continuing to lead people, regardless of what their actual tasks look like. And how you actually develop your chops over time, I'll be interested to see, how those things change. I think that higher ed and honestly, secondary education is going to eventually start preparing us for those things. And so what do new ways of learning do to impact future workforce?
Right. Well, that's a great take. And I think this feels like a perfect place to wrap it up. So hopefully we've given our listeners some clarity and strategies that they can think about, hopefully move towards implementation. Definitely want to thank you, Sarah. Again, Sarah Woodward, founder of AI Growth Ops. Really appreciate you taking the time. I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Me too. It's great to catch up, and I love what you guys are doing. And I think that this is an awesome platform for just, educating more people about different things that are coming in our industry. And so AI is a big one, and people need to be up on what's happening. So this is a great platform to be able to help do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And if your organization needs Sarah's help navigating your AI transformation strategy, you can book a call with her via her LinkedIn page. Be sure to follow her on LinkedIn. She's got great stuff coming out. Again, that's how we reconnected leading up to this conversation. And we want to hear from you, your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with any of the points that we brought up today? Let me know on LinkedIn. I'm at Richard L. Sims, it's SIMMS. And thank you again for joining us on The Digital Footprint. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you need help with your next big tech project, whether that's bringing a new SaaS product to market, scaling an existing product, go over to tyrannosaurustech.com, check us out, and we'd love to sync up anytime. So thanks again, Sarah. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate the time.
All right. Bye-bye.